Hey folks, welcome to the video. So I don't think that a false edge Mezano cut from left to right gets enough love, so let's talk about it real quick. Okay, you can certainly do the action linear and there's ways to generate power in it, and we'll talk about that in a second. Similarly, if you're staying linear, you can generate good speed and power by going off with the body slightly before the arms to hit something and to close, for them to cover and to close, because it's not a particularly meaningful strike, okay? So we're told in the manuscript that when we're cutting from left to right with a Mezano, or Mezani for plural, Mezano in this case because it's just from left to right, we are doing so with the false edge, okay? We are not doing it with the true edge, okay? The edge in line with our knuckles. There's a lot of reasons for this, but the predominant set of reasons is the fact that when you're cutting, you want to lead with the weapon, okay? So if I'm cutting true edge, I'm leading with the hand right up until the last minute when the weapon starts to come forward, okay? Whereas if I lead with the false edge, I'm creating a threat with a point the whole time, okay? Now, instinctively, if you give most people a sword for the first time and you say, right, cut across the middle from left to right, they are gonna do it true edge, okay? Because naturally, it feels like the right way to do it, okay? So initially, it's a bit counterintuitive to want to cut with the false edge. Mechanically though, it makes a lot of sense in terms of creating a threat, following your weapon, etc. Now the challenge really of cutting false edge is the fact that mechanically it's quite hard to get a lot of power in it, okay? And it doesn't, in my view, it doesn't feel very much like a cutting action. When you're staying linear, okay, to me it feels a bit uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like it's got a lot of power in it, okay? There's certain things you need to do and think about with Mezani from left to right, Mezano from left to right, to help you along a little bit. One of the things is to not think linear, okay? You can certainly do the action linear and there's ways to generate power in it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But in reality, okay, you need to be thinking about this action as an offline motion, okay? If you're coming offline, throwing the point forward, the rotation of your body with the step can add a lot of power. Okay, so if we're here stepping offline and we're just cutting, because you're bringing the hips around, you can sort of throw the hand forward and generate a bit of speed at the point, which is going to give it a bit more percussive impact. Really, the easiest way to think about it is like a hybrid between a cut and a thrust. The target for most Mezanos from left to right really should be your opponent's flanks, okay? Unless it's a defensive action, and we're not going to worry about that too much today. You're going to keep the hand low and you're going to throw the point forward, okay? And really you're aiming for one of Fury's targets, which is the flanks. The target is between shoulders and hips, really head and hips, and you can certainly throw it up towards your opponent's head and face if you want to, but generally we would try and keep the hands relatively low when we do that. We wouldn't throw it up like this with the hands up, unless of course a specific situation dictates that you should. So if I'm doing it static, linear, just rotation of the feet, the easiest way to get speed and power into it is to, as I say, rotate the hips and throw it forward, okay? Now, generally speaking, when you're cutting, you're leading with the weapon and you're following with your body behind. This is an instance where it's worth experimenting with throwing the hips and body and then letting the sword come through, okay? Just to help generate a bit of rotation and then let the arm go off. If we're adding in the legs, then it's easier to step, throw and rotate the body, okay? Because the chances of that being intercepted and the damage you're supposedly going to do against your opponent isn't going to be very high, you really need to think about recovery very quickly when you throw a false edge Mezano. On that basis, an easy way to think about it is to throw, step and then recover back to the right hand side, because you're keeping your distance, okay? And it's just a nice clean way to polish off that action. So we're 1, 2. Of course, you could push home, you could, find them throwing up a cover, enter into a stretto play, and that of course is all logical steps on top of an action like this. But from a linear perspective, or from a stepping perspective, with sword in one hand, it does feel a little bit more towards the cutting side than the thrusting side. The most important thing is you're trying to catch something, you're trying to dig your punter into something, okay? Again, if we're thinking about it as an offensive action. So really you're trying to still sort of stick them in the ribs or flank. You're trying to hit them with the very end. When you put the thing in two hands, the same rule holds true. You want to come false edge from left to right. You don't want to cross your hands, okay? You don't want to cross your hands because you lead with the hands, as I've said. You certainly don't want to cross your hands with two hands on it, because if it's covered or someone beats down on top of that weapon, breaks the path of the weapon, as we would say, the risk of losing control is very, very high. Very, very, very high. What's more interesting about using it in two hands, doing that action with sword in two hands, is the fact that again, in my view, it starts to feel even less like a cutting action, okay? Because at least with one hand on it, you can sort of give the tip a sort of arc, an arch, and it feels a little bit more like a cutting action. But with two hands on it, unless you're doing this, you're letting your hands come out and giving yourself the freedom to cross the hands a little bit, which is still certainly fine. Strictly speaking, say from Dente di Cingali, it's not going to feel much like a cutting action at all, okay? Because you're just jabbing the point forward. So again, now it starts to feel very much like a thrusting action, okay? And if we stay completely linear from this posture, you know, you're just sort of sticking it forward. It's still going to hurt your opponent. It's still an effective strike, but it's not, let's say we're doing it trudge, it's not a cutting action as such, okay? It's more of a sticking action, a thrusting action, to use better terminology. Similarly, if you're staying linear, you can generate good speed and power by going off of the body slightly before the arms, okay? But I wouldn't think of this as a linear action, okay? I'd think of a thrust as a linear action. I wouldn't think of a Mezano from left to right as a linear action. Again, coming offline is a big friend here. So offline, jabbing it forward, coming down, or closing, or entering a play, or finding a cover, so on and so forth, okay? But coming offline, 1, 2, yeah, coming around your opponent's defense. If you're my opponent and I'm here, I'm gonna come offline and just jab it forward. Again, head to hip, predominantly flanks. Those are your targets. Okay, our takeaway exercise for today is a linear beating action. Lots of videos on this on the channel. I think beats are also very unloved, since we're talking about unloved things in this video. Normally we would start this off with sword in one hand. What happens is my opponent is cutting to my left from their right. I'm trying to come from behind their weapon to basically use my false edge to deflect their cut, so that I've created an opening to cut back down, okay? In isolation, okay, Fury says in all things I find you are covered, so I'm in my one-hand sword posture, this comes in, up that comes, down this goes, and I'm through. This is quite a common action in the manuscript, the works of Fury. 1, 2, and down, and if I'm pushed for time, for space, I can do the offline movement and the action at the same time, okay? We're going to look at it with sword in two hands. Again, same principle. Ideally, we would always step and then come back down, okay? We step as an extra insurance policy. If you miss that, or you miss the timing of it, you are not moving your body offline, not keeping yourself safe. So we try and do that. With two hands, it's a lot quicker. Up, down, yeah? I can step a little bit. I can stay static. Up, down. Yeah, I can come really wide. Up, down. Or I can take a different line altogether. Up, down. Sometimes though, there's a time and a place for doing it without a step, okay? It increases the risk, but we need to prepare for lots of different eventualities, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Dente di Cingali, ideally, so we're here. Yeah, it could be in both versions, but it doesn't matter. Cut comes in, I'm going to rotate the body, throw up the point into posta frontale, cut back down the line. Now, when we're cutting, we always try and start and finish in a posta or a guard. So we're here, we're going back into Cingali, okay? So we're here, no movement of the feet apart from a rotation, a sort of half volta stabile, up, down, up, down. From the side, very simple, rotate, up, down, okay? What we're not letting our arms do is go way back here, wasted action, up, down, down. Out of distance, into distance, strike, out of distance. It's a useful action to do from a certain time and a place, especially if your opponent follows you when you're trying to recover. So if you've done an exchange, I've dropped low, but my opponent has followed me quicker than I thought, we're out, we're down, we're here. Last thing to add on is a recovery as well, okay? So generally speaking, if you're doing it in a traditional way with an offline movement coming up, attacking, I'm very big on either doing something at the end of it, i.e. closing, grappling, whatever, or recovering, okay? Because you want to come back out into somewhere that's safe, okay? Because you might not be fully aware of what's going on. Distance gives you safety, okay? So with this action, we're up, we're down back into posture, and then just drop back into coda longa to give us that extra distance, to drop back into another position of familiarity that I can do things from if I have to, but just to give me the extra space in case it hasn't gone quite to plan, okay? Why would we do this action? Lots of reasons. Why are we doing it today? Because if you're very good at executing this in a kind of linear, static-ish sort of way, when you do add in the feet coming offline, it's a lot quicker action. You're much more familiar with the mechanics of beating your opponent's sword, okay? So we're here, ideally we would step and beat high, then we would come down, okay? But that action of understanding where you're making contact on the opponent's weapon and so on and so forth, if you can do it linear, you're only going to do it better, adding in the feet, coming offline like you should. Now, certainly in my experience, Mezanos from left to right don't get a lot of love. From right to left, they get loads of love, but that's a bit more traditional now. It's a bit more, you know, hands high, hands low, whatever. A bit more traditional off the right shoulder. From left to right, I don't see them very often. I don't see them as being particularly common. The most important thing about an action, all of the actions, but particularly that one, that kulpi, that blow, is you need to be prepared to do something on the end of it, okay? Because from this kind of position, or any low position down here, you know, it's going to be something your opponent has their eye on, okay? They know which direction the sword's coming from. They know your options are either to come up or thrust, but it's all going to be coming from down low. You can't rely on the fact that you're going to hit anything with it, okay? So like with everything else, if we're coming offline, if we're staying static, we should be coming offline. Coming offline, throwing that action forward, okay? We need to be prepared to do something at the end of it, to hit something and to close, for them to cover and to close, because it's not a particularly meaningful strike, okay? In reality, I think most of us would just be thrusting. We'd just be thrusting, okay? So a few thoughts on Mezanos from left to right, why they're false edge, and it is important that they're false edge. Any one of our guys, if they see anybody true edging from that side, from the positions, the posture that we're given with Fury, they are going to be breaking on top of that weapon, and you're going to lose control of it pretty much 7 times out of 10. So it's super important to bear that in mind. We're always false edge from left to right, okay? And there's just a little bit there about 2 hands and 1 hand. Have a play, have a feel, let me know. Okay, to separate dagger from modern knife, okay? So one of the things I mentioned was modern knife to win but not to kill. So if we think of a random example, so let's say these are both knives, okay? They're Rondell training weapons, but we'll say that they're both knives. If John was to thrust at me, I might do a technique like this, where I'm covering, this is modern knife, where I'm covering the arm and cutting across the top of the arm, okay? What I might also do is hook the knife in the bottom, turn it up against the arm, and cut the skin against the back of the arm as I move away. Okay, so that's a modern knife technique, okay? I pass it over, I hook it in, I turn it, and I cut through as I move. So I'm cutting at him. We're exchanging cuts all the time, because I'm trying to win my knife fight, I'm not trying to kill him, okay? If we are thinking modern knife to kill, and we use a very similar action, I can cover across the top, getting a cut across the top, hook in, give it a turn, cut the skin on the back, and then stab in here into the rib cage as I'm moving, okay? So that is using modern knife to win, to kill. However, if I'm using a dagger, it looks very, very different, okay? Instead of worrying about the mid-range to cover and cut, I'm always thinking about protecting myself against this big thrust, okay? I'm also thinking about the quickest way to kill it, okay? So for me, that's gonna be a cover. I'm not gonna worry about any of this kind of stuff because it's not gonna kill him, okay? And I can't cut with it because it's a dagger, not a knife. So I'm gonna cover and I'm gonna stab him. Okay, I aim for the armpit because he may have armour on, and this is a weak area whether you're armoured or not. Another option would be just to cover the arm and just come straight down, or whatever, to the face, to the body. But the point is, I'm not using the mid-range like I would with a knife. Let's say we're just knife fighting. You know, the mid-range is all about cutting things, protecting the heart and cutting things with a modern knife. Yeah, I'll take that arm as well. That's modern knife. With a dagger, we don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. Thrust comes in, I protect and I